Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church, Sunday School Department, Ladies Class, and we are studying the book of Revelation. We are on chapter 8 today. To give you a little background and to bring you up to speed about where we're at, John is the oldest and the last living apostle of Jesus, and he is being exiled to the Isle of Patmos, and while he is there, God has given him a vision, and he tells John that he wants him to be a scribe, to take down the things that he sees, the things that are, and the things that are to come. The things that he has seen would be contained in chapter 1. It's a recounting of the vision, and then in where he was at when the vision occurred and that kind of thing. And then chapter 2 and 3 are letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor, that John is an elder of each one of these churches. They come to him for advice. He is their beloved elder leader. John has become a very beloved elder. He is no longer known as the son of thunder. And he is in this dire circumstance. And in chapter 4, Chapter 4, God brings him up to heaven in his vision, and he is the only person in the Bible that gives an account of what the throne room of Christ, of God, looks like from the advantage point of being in heaven. Other prophets that write about the throne of God, seeing the throne of God and knowing what it looks like and describing it all, are looking at it from the vantage point of being on earth and looking upward. I thought that was interesting. We saw that John was aware, and the heavenly host was aware, that there is a title deed to the earth, because remember in Genesis when man sinned, it wasn't just him, it wasn't just man, but God cursed the earth as well as mankind. And so, in essence, God gave control of the earth to man. And when man sinned, man gave that control to Satan. So in God's hand now is the deed to the earth. And John walks through his despondency of no one worthy to open that deed, to see what is required to return it back into God's control again, because it is still under Satan's control. Remember when Jesus was taken into the desert to be tempted, one of the temptations was one of power. Satan told Jesus, bow down and worship me and I will give you all that you see, all the cities. Jesus didn't deny that he was the king of what he was seeing. He did not deny that Satan had the right to say what he said. But this deed that God holds in his hand is what's going to happen to return the earth and to cleanse the earth and give it back so that Jesus takes it again. So now we have opened the 6 seals that was holding the deed closed, the scroll closed. And we went to chapter 7, where it's kind of like an intermission. There was a question asked at the end of chapter 6, and everything looked so dire and so awful that the question rang out. It said, well, who's going to be able to survive this? And God said, wait a minute. Let me show you. So chapter 6, he gives us even a more forward look into the future of the people that come to know Christ, even in the tribulation. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story, or a sight, once you get used to reading, knowing what you're reading. Now we're going back to finish those seals. There's one seal left, and that's the 7th seal. When that 7th seal is open, then that means the whole plan of God for the earth, for the rehabilitation of earth, for the redemption of earth is being laid out. So let's read the first 5 verses of chapter 8, and we'll start there. This is telling you about the 7th seal, what happens when it is opened. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all of God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of God's people, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it onto the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumbling, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Okay. 7th seal is about to be opened. Jesus has it in his hand, and he breaks the seal. Have you ever had a hush of anticipation? I have. You've ever been in a wonderful performance, maybe a musical performance, and you're inside the big stadium or the big auditorium, and the lights have been on, and all of a sudden the lights go down? Before the lights go down, there's a lot of talking, a lot of whispering, a lot of carrying on. But when those lights go down, everyone gets quiet. It's anticipatory of what's fixing to come about. There's another time in Scripture that talks about a quiet time, and actually it is every time that the Jewish priests went into the holy place and into the Holy of Holies. All the other priests who weren't on duty would stand quietly, reverently, and prayerfully while he went inside the door and did the assignment that he had for that day. Read about Zechariah and Elizabeth when John the Baptist was announced to Zechariah. That was a lifetime occurrence. There were so many priests that they drew by lot who was going to serve in the temple, and it was Zechariah's lot. They drew his lot for him to serve. This may have been the only time he has ever been called on to go into the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Don't know if you realize that or not, but it could easily have been. He went in alone, and there is a part of a scripture said that the other priest stood outside prayerfully. That was supposed to have been very, very quiet and very, very reverent. And Zechariah went in. Of course, we know he met Gabriel there and got the message about John going to be born to Zechariah's elderly barren wife, Elizabeth. But that little period of quietness is important. It shows reverence. So going up to heaven and seeing this verse come alive, Jesus took the 7th seal. He prepared to open that last barrier to the deed, to the earth, and there was silence in heaven. We had just seen in chapter 7, there was a lot of praise going on, a lot of singing, a lot of praise from angels, from God's people, from uncountable numbers of people praising Jesus for his work of salvation. A lot of noise. We talked about that in my Sunday school class. I said, cacophony is where a lot of people are saying different things all at the same time, and it's kind of chaotic. I don't think it was a cacophony. I think it was more of a harmony in heaven. All of the beautiful wording that was there would have been distinct, but it would have been quite loud because everybody was joining in praising the Lord. So there was a lot of noise. There was a lot of music going on in heaven. But now Jesus has got their attention, and he's opened that seal, and it's just like with bated breath. Let's see what's going to happen next. And John is just like them. He's watching this. He's trying to remember who John is. John is in his 90s. He was a first century man, so he couldn't even talk to you about weaponry that was in the 1800s. That was 1800s beyond him. He couldn't tell you about cannon fire or musket fire. He couldn't tell you about the weapons that was used in subsequent wars, or even in World War II, the airplanes, the bombers, the fighters, the ships on the ocean, that big a ship on the ocean, all of those kind of things. He wouldn't have known how to describe to you Pearl Harbor. And he certainly wouldn't have known how to describe to you in words in his language what happened in America at 9/11. And he wouldn't have been able to tell you about Hiroshima and Nagasaki either. All these occurrences, he would look at them and try to find something within his known language to describe it to you. So that's why you're going to come across things that when he says like a, such as that is something that is beyond his experience, and he doesn't know how to phrase it to you. So he's going to say, well, it's kind of like. And if I ask you to describe transportation in the year 2424, you couldn't do it either. So give John a little slack. So John, they have this quietness in heaven, and John's sitting there with anticipation, I'm sure. And John tells you in verse 2 what else he saw. He said, and I saw the 7 angels. And all of your older manuscripts use that definitive the. They are a different class of angels, we assume, by using that article before these 7 angels. We have come to think that they are probably archangels, or we think they would be archangels, and we have named them, and I had their names written here for you. You've met one of them, and the story that I just told you was Gabriel, so he's one of them. And the Bible itself tells us the name of one other archangel. I've just told you Gabriel. What's another one that you can find in our Bible? Michael. The other 5 are in Jewish tradition, and you'll find their names in Apocrypha. And I don't know if that's true or not, but the traditional names for the 7 is Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel, Sarael, Sariel, Rachiel, and Rumiel. So that's who John says he sees. They're standing before God. Notice they're not sitting on thrones. They're not bowing to the ground, although they do bow to the ground. But at this occasion, they're standing. They're standing before the throne. Who is sitting on the throne? Jesus, God is. And 7 trumpets. Each of these archangels was given a trumpet. Now, it's not the kind of trumpet that was used in the that is used in the high school bands around here that my granddaughter played. More than likely, it is a single longhorn gold. The Jewish people, it's all through the Old Testament, especially the Old Testament, where they use those trumpets as a call to battle, as a call to assembly, as some sort of warning call. They had several different, and the people knew the sound of the trumpet. It carried a long way, and they would say 1 long blast means this, 2 long blasts means something else, 2 short blasts means something, maybe, and any configuration of those. They could send messages to a lot of people by using the call of the trumpet. I had a granddaughter that played the flute and a granddaughter that played the trumpet. And I can understand why they would use the trumpet. Very loud and very clear. Then in verse 3, it says, another angel. So this would be the 8th angel. Well, we've got a lot of angels in heaven, and they're all different kinds of ranks or groups. And you have the 7 that we've just spoke of. You have this one who is evidently in charge of facilitating, and you've got this 8th angel that stands here. You've got the 4 that are flying around the throne at all times, calling holy, 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 seraphim, and it's just amazing all the different kinds of angels that God uses, and they're not all just like we've pictured in our Christmas cards and those kind of things. Lots of different roles. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. Okay, so this angel had a golden censer, and he's coming to stand. I want you to go back to our study in Exodus where we talked about the tabernacle. It had 3 big components. You had the outside wall, which was white linen, and then inside they had another structure. It also was a tent structure, and it was 45 feet by 15, and the first 30 feet was the holy place. And inside the holy place was the candelabra, the 7-pronged candelabra, then the showbread table, and the curtain that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. It had in front of it an altar, an incense altar. And behind the curtain, in the 15 by 15 by 15 section of this tent, was the Ark of the Covenant, which the throne of God, it took the place, or it represented the throne of God. And the prayers of the saints, anyone that believes in the Christ, anyone that believes in God the Father, when you pray, we have always said there are 3 answers to prayer. Yes, that's the answer that most of the time we want. No, it's not appropriate for you to ask for that. It's not appropriate for me to want that. It's not going to benefit me in the long run. It's not going to glorify my Lord. So that answer's no. And then there's another answer. Wait. So when we pray, and especially when you pray those prayers that God tells you to wait, we're going to find out. God really enjoys His saints, which is you and me, if you believe in Jesus Christ, praying to Him and talking to Him. Tell Him about your day. Tell Him what you desperately need or want or request of Him. Those things that He says, wait, every one of those prayers is precious to Him, and He keeps them. And when the priest that came in with the golden censer and the incense, it mingled, it represented, it was symbolic of those prayers that are going up to God. And God listens to those prayers, and it's like a sweet savor to Him. I love to smell a good, sweet, fresh smell, don't you? My mom bakes a lot of stuff with cinnamon, and I love to walk in her kitchen and smell the cinnamon. My husband loves the odor of vanilla. He says that's what heaven's going to smell like to him. Be vanilla. But this one, the prayers of God's people are mixed with the incense. And notice there's an abundance of incense, which infers that there's an abundant amount of prayers. God can listen to them all. And the smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of God's people, went up before God from the angel's hand. He comes in with hot coals. and he places the incense on those, and he waves it, and that distributes the smoke of the incense, mixes with the prayers at the altar, which are kept and preserved, and then God enjoys them. All right? So when he's done that, the angel then took the censer and he filled it with fire from the altar. There's no fire inside the Holy of Holies or fire inside the holy place. Not sacrificial fires. It is, the lampstand is lit, and I guess there's fire on that, but not an open fire. So this angel takes a coal from the altar outside, the sacrificial altar, symbolically. This represents Jesus and his sacrifice. And he takes it, and let's look at the language of chapter 5. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and he hurled it to the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. This is standing for God's judgment. You didn't accept the sacrifice, so now there's judgment. Remember, all believers are now in heaven. All that's left on the earth are people who have never made a profession of faith, and those people who follow Satan. Don't be discouraged when you read all these terrible things that are going to happen. If you believe in Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're not there. This is all is after all of the believers are gone. It's really bad. But you know what? These people have had a lifetime to accept Christ. And they haven't yet. So, we're going to see that when he hurls it down to the earth, these are all going to be judgments against the earth, the first 3 or 4 trumpets that are blown. And this first trumpet we start on chapter 8, verse 6, with the trumpets being blown. The first 4 will affect the earth and man indirectly, and then the 5th and the 6th affect mankind directly. Then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets, they prepared to sound them. If you were going to be playing a trumpet before Lord, what are some of the things you would do to prepare? These angels prepared. Stand a little straighter. Raise the trumpet to your lips. Prepare to blow. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came down hail and fire mixed with blood, and it hurled down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was burned up. 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the grass was burned up. Okay, this is big. This is big. When the first angel blows his horn, the earth is rocked with hail. These are not normal, everyday thunderstorms with hail. These are hailstones that are mixed with blood, and they are hurled down on the earth. So can you imagine hailstones mixed with blood? 1/3 of the earth was burned up. Some of the ministers that I've listened to and some of the commentators that I've read when it talks about and a third of the earth, a third of the earth, a third of the earth, we'll see it a little bit later. They think that that means like globally. Say I owned 100 acres. Well, 3 acres of it, or 30 acres, 33 acres of it would have been burned up. Some people think that it was the earth that way, that a third of Tennessee, a third of Ohio, a third of, a third of that. But others says no, it could be a third, but be all of the river, all of the forest areas in like Yosemite and Yellowstone and Redwood Forest and all those, and set those all afire. It could be a third of the trees in the United States, or it could be all of the Smoky Mountains, and that would equal out a third. The great forests that are in Russia, it could be, but it's going to total out to be a third of the earth. Those trees are going to burn. All right, what else does it say it's going to burn? It doesn't say a third, but it says all the green grass would be burned. Why do we need those trees? Why do we need that grass? What about the oxygen that we breathe? A lot of the oxygen that you breathe comes from forests, from trees, comes from the grass. Most of it comes from the kelp in the ocean, but we get a lot from the trees, and a lot of cleansing of carbon dioxide from the trees. And now that is really dissipated. Okay? What about the grass? An easy one would be to say that now we have cattle and other animals that feed on grass, and if the grass is not there, how are the animals going to survive? If the animals do not survive, what are we going to eat? Okay? So the food supply. All right? This is one, the more you think about it, the more terrible it's going to be. And it's a third of the earth. Can you imagine the firefighters that are out there trying to contain the world's largest fires? Can you imagine farmers trying to hold on to their land when the grass is all burned up? What happens when the grass burns away and it's gone? Remember the Dust Bowls in the 1920s? They lost land and they lost crops because the wind would come by. And what about erosion? Wind erosion? Horrible, horrible, horrible. And in verse 8, the second trumpet sounded. The second angel sounded his trumpet. And something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Okay. Something like, see John's phrasing? He says, I've never seen anything like this in my life. This is totally out of my realm of understanding. So I'm going to try to put it into words that maybe convey to you what I see. It's like a mountain. What I'm seeing, it was like a huge mountain. But it was all afire. The mountain itself was on fire, and it was thrown into the sea. Have you ever been to Hawaii? Have you ever seen the footage of Mount St. Helens? I believe it was a volcano he saw that erupted and didn't just blow its top off, but blew the whole mountain. When I was in Hawaii, we got in a helicopter and we flew over the top of one of the active volcanoes. It wasn't bubbling out. It was beneath the surface. You could look down in the tunnels and see red rivers of lava under there. And it was, even in that copter way high up, and it was air-conditioned copter, you could tell how hot that was. And it was red flames, and we followed the trail. It was as it went down to the ocean, and then he hovered the airplane, the helicopter out so that we could see where that lava came out and hit the ocean. and it was bright, blindingly bright red as it hit the ocean. I think what John saw was volcanic action. Go in on your computer and put volcanic or volcanoes active, and look at one of those maps. They're everywhere. And I believe they become active in this one, in the second trumpet. He said it was all ablaze and it was thrown into the sea. Mount St. Helens, when it blew off one whole side of it, the top and one whole side of it, debris went everywhere. Whole trees were moved miles. It was phenomenal. And the ash, the people that lived in Oregon and in Washington fought that ash for months. We in East Tennessee had our sky darkened by so much ash. It was amazing. And that was one. This is not just one. He says in the tree, and it also, the sea turned to blood. Where did that blood come from? Well, that blood part of it could have been the redness from the lava going into the sea. It also could have been, it says a third of the living creatures in the sea died. Whale blood, shark blood, all those animals in the sea that died, their blood, part of them were blown by the concussion, they were ripped apart. Then you have the men and women who works on these ships. They perished, and they're talking about their blood, enough to pollute, plus supernatural. And one of the pastors I listened to said that there was, on average, of 50,000 cargo ships on the ocean on any given day. So if a third of those were destroyed, that means the people working on those ships were also destroyed. 50,000, that's a lot. You know, a third of that, well, half would be 25. So it'd probably be about somewhere between 15 and 18,000 ships. Huge cargo ships. Ships that are carrying goods from one place to the next. This is huge. This is huge. This is hitting us economically. It's hitting us with food, with famine going, with the loss of all of this. So we've done the first and second trumpet. We're going to talk about the third trumpet the next time we meet. And I hope you have a good evening. Enjoy it. May God bless you. Goodbye.